a trade association, or is that something we pay dues to? Like, you know, I'm looking at an article here from 2010, and, you know, they're supposed to help save us money on the electric. So where does that come into all this?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
PNPA is an agency developed, in fact, its leadership today is much of the leadership of the borough of Chambersburg. Its intent was to be a vehicle for work as a consortium group of municipals in the state to accomplish various objectives. You know, today it doesn't do anything to be practical. It doesn't do anything, and as far as I'm aware, the borough of Percy is not a member of PNPA at this moment. Of course, if it was going to accomplish some viable objective, then I'm sure the borough would jump into it and be a part of it. But as it exists today, it's just the structure or governance is set up to be able to do something if it were valuable to do it, and that's what's not been determined by the group of meetings there.
Oh, okay, because I guess we're already a part of the Pennsylvania Municipal Electric Association, which is is that like a trade organization then? That
It's basically an annual association of all the boroughs to educate and, you know, to come together to collaborate. I would describe it that way, for training and education.
Training, education. Yes.
Okay.
That's what I would describe it.
Okay. All right. That's all. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Any other questions?
Susan Green, 623 Swansea Street. Well, that was a lot of information. And I just have a couple questions. There was something in there about the PP&L zone. Are there any other options other than that? There wasn't, I didn't see anything.
Okay, yeah, just a clarification of what that means. The borough is located in what this marker refers to as the PPL zone. Of course, that's Pennsylvania Power and Light. The region represented by Pennsylvania Power and Light. So it's just when you talk about where to bring power, you're not taking it to some other region. Of course, you're bringing it to the PPL zone, as they refer to it.
Okay. Well, that explains
So it's
it.
just the location of delivery. It's you know, it's not something to be confusing. It's just regionally where you're located.
Well, I think I'm a little confused, but it is Monday.
Susan, you could also add that sometimes you can buy your power delivered to that zone. Other times you can buy your power at the source, and then you pay the cost of getting it. So sometimes we balance that. Is it cheaper to buy maybe the transmission cost, or is it cheaper to have them give you the prices back here, which they absorb the risk. So we often balance that back.
And portfolio management, is that what you'll be doing? And when it comes across your desk and it's a good opportunity, you'll pass it on and it'll come before council to make a decision?
Sure, I would say that we're a part of that as Dan directs us to be, or as council directs us to be. It's not.
And they'll be suitable amount of time, it won't be, you gotta make a decision right away.
Well, I'll comment on that because, you know, AMP brings us alternatives from time to time. Some of those are under time constraints that they're under with respect to participation. So any alternative that Dan or myself would bring to you for the borough for participation, it would be our desire to give ample time to consider it. But, you know, in the past, there have been several alternatives from AMP that were on a tight timetable. Many of them, all of them. Obviously, all of them have been under a tight timetable, and frankly, I think we struggle to evaluate those and bring recommendations and whatnot in an appropriate amount of time because of that tight time schedule. There's no way around that if we're having these alternatives being brought to us with those timetables already on them. So my thought on that is you can either choose to consider it or not consider it up front. If it's a timetable that the council's not comfortable with, they can say, well, we're going to take a pass because we feel comfortable.
Because they really sometimes need the time to investigate it and make sure it's really going to be what's best for the community.
Of course, and I think we re-emphasize that to him routinely that we need more time to consider these alternatives. There's quite a process that has to occur in order to make these decisions. I think they appreciate that. We just try to bring it up.
I believe that, we do have a process in place to take a look at these. We'd like the lengthier time period to take a look at it. However, if we do have a structure in place for how the potential purchase is going to fit into our overall plan, it becomes an easier decision for me. I don't want to speak for all of council, but sometimes you see these, it appears to be a good idea, but I don't know what it's going to mean 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the line. So now, in taking a look at 2020 beyond, we can visualize where and how this is going to fit with some of the percentages that we talked about this evening. So it lessens the burden. If we have an attorney who, of course, can look at the contract and the feasibility of the contract from a legal aspect. And I believe from our point of view, kind of running this electric business, we're able to see how it fits in with the overall portfolio.
There were just a couple of times when it was like, oh, we have to make a decision right away, and sometimes, if you don't have the time to investigate it, it might not be like the best. Okay.
And Blue Creek was an example of that. They came to us, that came from Blue Creek Windfall. It's not their project, they agriculture. They came to us. The initial numbers looked attractive. Of course, a lot of things look attractive compared to what we're paying. So David Garrett said, look at this, he along with other clients, looked at that. He looked at it on behalf of us and other clients, which gave us the reduction in price. Yeah, it's a quick turnaround time, here it is, here's the numbers, he doesn't charge, so there's opportunities to combine, and we often combine the market products, are the excellent product we have a lot of time, and he can research those out and go to them. So we have to go reply to the market and find that with a lot less time. It's the resource products that are concepts.
And will we be committed to AMP in any way? I mean, like, it's not like we're under some kind of contract with them.
There is no commitment to AMP in a long term. You make individual commitments by the purchases that you make. So there's no long term commitment.
And just one final question, are there any other providers other than AMP?
Yeah, one of the things I was trying to address earlier is that AMP is a vehicle for us to get purchases from other providers. So you need to understand that it's not a sole source type issue with them. They are procuring some power on Percy's behalf from market companies. So they're always looking at all the different power suppliers that are out.
Are there other companies that do that other than AMP?
Absolutely. And AMP purchases from a lot of different entities. In fact, a couple of years ago, I reviewed all their contracts. They have like 25 or so different entities that they can buy power from at any given point in time. So, they're looking at other marketers out there and procuring the most competitive option, bringing it to the borough.
Okay, and that's what AMP does.
That's what AMP does.
Okay, so is there anybody other than AMP that does the same thing that they do? That's where I'm going with this. Is AMP the only one that does this? That procures?
They're not the only entity that does this. They're certainly a sizable entity in terms of how large they are. So they have over 100 municipal members, and they avail economies, but there are other entities that could do that sort of thing. As we mentioned earlier, you could do more of that on your own in interfacing with different marketers. The borough could do that, more of that on their own. It's just there are some advantages associated with doing it collectively with other municipals. So that's why we want to do that.
There is power in numbers.
Right, but what I'm getting at
Municipal.
is that AMP does this. Do you deal with anybody else that does the same thing that AMP does?
AMP, IC is essentially they're a joint action agency, and there are a number of entities out in the East half of the United States that do that type of thing. So there are a lot of different entities like that. They just regionally, they happen to be in a location that's in close proximity to Pennsylvania, and they are also a group of municipals, so they're more aligned with that. But there are other entities that do joint purchasing together. I wouldn't know which entity to recommend other than AMP in terms of having that type of size and that leverage. That's much of the reason why the borough is with AMP to do that. But there are other alternatives that could be.
And I guess also, Susan, if we find something that's cheaper than that, we're gonna go after it.
Yeah, I just.
We're not limited to that. So far, they brought some good projects to us, and that's why we go.
Yeah, I was just curious, because I know, it's like, you've got one company that does this, so there's gotta be other ones out there that do it, so I was just curious. Okay, thank you.
Good question.
Anyone else?
BBD's 512 Springport. That was a lot of information. As I understand, what you just answered Susan, is that you only deal with it. Is that correct? That's kind of what it sounded like. There are other options, but you only deal with it.
AMP is the entity we've chosen for scheduling services today.
Okay, so
And
that's.
to help us with that procurement. We could consider other options specifically for the scheduling and operation services. There are other entities that provide that function. Today we use it.
Okay. This PJM Interconnection LLC, is that the one on 55 Jefferson Avenue, Norristown?
I do not know the answer to their home address.
955 Jefferson Avenue, Norristown. That's where it's from. Are they also Exelon?
No.
But they took over the place where it was.
Their location on Valley Forge West Center, I think that's Jefferson Avenue.
Which is,
I'm not aware of it.
Okay, well,
Own that building.
when I was looking up some information here, I'm just a little concerned about that, is the company they're talking about, because they did have some federal liens, so I'm a little concerned with that. I think that's something we need to investigate.
PJM.
PJM Interconnection LLC, it's the one that is at 955 Jefferson Avenue. And several other. Okay, and my other question was, are you associated with First Energy Corporation?
Am I?
Is your company-
GDS, I work for GDS Associates. We are a consulting firm. We have no associations with any power markets. We're completely independent.
Okay. I can't remember the name.
It's okay, no
It's
problem.
not like more that other, but this Blue Creek.
That's a wind project that Iberdrola is over at AMP, and we're considering, but I have no association.
Okay. So your recommendation here is for AMP Ohio, or what am I missing?
There's no consideration of AMP on the agenda for this evening. AMP is a vehicle for purchasing our power supply. What we're talking about is the way in which we purchase power supply this evening. The recommendation is for the portfolio approach to purchasing energy requirements in the future. And that's what's for the consideration of council tonight.
But, and so there are other options than PJM, correct?
PJM is the market coordinator, so we're stuck with PJM.
There's not.
Yeah, well, they conduct the market. We have options for market power and where we purchase from, okay? But PJM is simply the coordinator. They're independent of those issues.
So if I lived in, say, East Rock Hill, and I chose PPNL, would I go through PJM?
PPNL has to deal with PJM, correct?
PICO, everybody?
Everybody has to deal with PJM, yes.
Pennsylvania, Jersey, and Maryland.
Yeah, all of the states that belong to PJM. When you're talking about options, PJM is simply the coordinator of the market. So there are many options for where we go and procure our supply. PJM is that coordinator, so you need to think of them as an independent with respect to where the borough of Percy goes to get its energy supply. Does that make sense?
I pretty much, yeah, but the way I'm understanding is do not have a choice as far as that goes.
As far as PJM goes, I mean, we're all, every entity that serves load in the northeast that's in that region has to coordinate through PJM.
I think if we would have gotten away from that, we would have, because it's expensive. But there's no option, no other option. They run the grid.
Doesn't sound very good.
No, it's not.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the public? How about the press? If there's no other questions to come before council at this time, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to especially thank the members of the